You may have heard your avoidant partner or your avoidant ex say that they were overwhelmed. They may have said this at the end of the relationship when they abruptly discarded you or slow faded out, or you may have heard this during any kind of disagreement, or perhaps when any kind of stressful event happened in their life. They became flustered and overwhelmed and likely shut down and distanced. Being overwhelmed is something that is very common for avoidance, especially dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidance that lean dismissive. This is because they simply don't have the capacity to handle stress or any kind of life crisis. Goes back to their childhood. They were never shown how to process emotions. They often grew up in households where you don't talk about feelings. If they had any kind of negative emotion, it was shot down. It was rejected. They had to figure it out on their own. And what they learned to do was avoid. Rather than deal with these difficult emotions, rather than deal with the stress, they learned to suppress it, to bottle it up, bury it, stick their head in the sand like an ostrich. So they never really develop the capacity to handle stress, to process emotions, and their brain becomes flooded with anxiety. Being flooded is when there's so much anxiety, so much cortisol, that you essentially just shut down and you can't even think clearly. And in these moments, the avoidant really just can't even think at all, and all they can think to do is to distance themselves, to push away whatever life stress is going on. Now, it could be a work stress, it could be a family stress, a financial stress. They can't cut these stresses out of their lives. However, they can push away their partner. Being in a relationship is a net source of stress for an avoidant because there's pressure on them. Pressure to be emotionally available for their partner, pressure to give something of themselves, pressure to meet expectations. It causes them stress just being in the relationship. When other life circumstances are easy and not very stressful, they can tolerate the stress of the relationship to get the validation and the connection. But when other life stresses compound, they tend to become very overwhelmed, very flooded, and they look for immediate stress relief. So the most disposable item in their life becomes the relationship, and they feel the sense of immediate relief. Now, after a period of time and no contact, and especially after other life circumstances have dwindled down or resolved, they can regret the decision to dump their partner because of the stress that was not even due to the relationship. But in the moment, when they are stressed, they tend to get flooded and they really don't have the ability or the capacity to articulate their feelings. Space is really how they regulate themselves. When they're taking this space, it's most often that they're not really contemplating the issue, that they're not trying to resolve things. They're distracting themselves. They're avoiding dealing with the problem because avoiding is how they regulate. Avoiding is how they self-soothe, finding other external distractions, things to keep them preoccupied. It could be work or activities that are dopamine chasing to make them feel good. But they're very likely not actually processing the issue at hand. They're likely avoiding it. But that is how they regulate their nervous system and bring their anxiety level down. So at the end of the relationship, when they're done and they say they can't give you what you need, it's very common for them to also say that they are overwhelmed. And their instinct is to cut and run and avoid. And again, unfortunately, being in the relationship, you're often the first thing to go in their lives. It's not fair because you prioritize them. You never would cut them out because of life stresses that happen. So it's not that you deserve to have it happen to you. You certainly didn't. But it is a capacity issue on this person's part. Yes, they can learn to develop the capacity to handle stress and process emotions in a healthier way. They have to want it though. They have to be willing to do the work, which should include therapy with a licensed psychotherapist. And they can build that capacity to regulate their emotions, process stress, not get so flooded, and be able to communicate their feelings, wants, and needs in a healthier way rather than just avoiding and pushing away the person that they're in a relationship with.